for knowing Islam as, as detailed a way as I could. So it was not sufficient for me to just say, okay, I became a Muslim, and I'm now a Muslim. Oh yeah, I'll pray 5 times a day, I'll do this. No, I needed to know, everything I could about it, to understand it, to be able to explain it to others. Because of course my parents, my family, they want to know, well, why? And if I couldn't give them some logical or reasonable explanation, I felt myself, deficient, because they deserved a logical and reasonable explanation.
From a spiritual point of view, how close have you been in your religion, in your communication, in your communion with God? How close do you think you've got?
Well, I feel the presence of God in my life, as a reality now. Before, growing up as a Christian, it was distant. It was far away. It was represented by a man, and a man and God, that's like blocking you from the real God. Because if Jesus is the God, then it means he as a man is everywhere, and he sees everything, and it just didn't make sense from that perspective, that man is man. We have a limitation. We are born, we die. We don't have the ultimate characteristics and qualities which raise us above the creation. We are part of creation. We're animals, just another level. We're a bit higher. That's all, really. Although we tend to look at ourselves as, being supreme beings, in that sense in this world, but the reality is that we're only a step up above the animals. So whether you worship a man or you worship a cow or anything else, you're still worshiping God's creation. So, how to get close to God when you don't know who God is.
So you discovered God in your submission, in your communion, during prayer time?
Yeah, it was really, for me, I had to discover God to go beyond the intellectual acceptance of Islam, because I could accept Islam intellectually, that it did have the good points of all of the various systems. It was free from the bad points of those systems. But still, that was an intellectual exercise. For me to accept God in my heart, to accept God in my soul, in that sense, it required another step, a step where I could feel God in my life, and I had my own, personal experience which led me to conclude, to remove any doubt about the existence of God. Because of course, as a communist, for how many years, 4 or 5 years, I was denying God's existence altogether. There was no God. So for you to go from that to belief in God means that you have to make a leap of faith, as they say, or you have to make a step which now carried you into the spiritual realm.
You have got knowledge, and from there you put pen to paper. You've written some books on Islam. Could we take a look at some of the things you've written?
Well, the books I wrote initially were books to clarify confusion which existed amongst new Muslims in the West. My initial writings were about Shiaism, to clarify that this is not real Islam, because it was being promoted in the 80s through Khomeini. It was promoted as Islam, but in fact it wasn't. So I needed to clarify that, because I had access to information which people in the West didn't have. So my initial writings were in that area. I also wrote about polygamy. One of my early books was Polygamy in Islam, because this was something which was new to people in the West, and the society considered it to be something forbidden. This is called bigamy, a crime. Here is Islam is saying it's a way of life, it's legitimate. So to understand it, to explain the rules governing it, no, it's not a free-for-all, there are rules governing it, so I wrote on that. Then I wrote on Tawheed, on the unique oneness of God, the basic Islamic theological concept of God. So that was like you could say, my magnus opus, of my writings, right? The book called The Fundamentals of Tawheed. Then I wrote on Islamic studies in general, because when I finished my my BA and I started on my master's, I became a teacher in high school and junior high. I was asked to teach Islamic studies, but there were no books available in English on Islamic studies, so I had to create textbooks for the children. So that process produced a series of textbooks called Islamic Studies, 4 books for junior high and high school, which I produced.
These teachings you did in Canada?
No, they were being used in English medium schools in Saudi Arabia and around the world. They were used in Canada, US, UK, Australia. They're being used all over the world today. Then I started, because when I moved from Saudi Arabia to the UAE, I became a professor in the American University in Dubai, and I taught there for 10 years, so Islamic studies and Arabic. So I now had to create books which explained Arabic from an English perspective, so I wrote 2 books on that. Then I also had to explain, the various disciplines of Islamic studies, so I started to create textbooks for fiqh, for hadith, for tafsir, for, the other basic disciplines of Islamic studies. And then I set up a department of Islamic studies and worked further in terms of creating more and more books, dealing with current thought. One of my books is called The Clash of Civilizations, an Islamic Point of View, because that book came out by Huntington, Samuel P. Huntington's book. So it needed an Islamic view on all of this. So I did a writing on that. And so on and so forth. My books actually tended to be more academic, basically to prepare for setting up a university myself, which I set up in India back in 2009. I went to Chennai in South India and I set up a university there called Preston International College. And from there I went online to develop the Islamic Online University. And of course these textbooks form the backbone of the courses. Most of the courses there, we use other texts also, but it's the core backbone for the textbooks for the university.
Dr. Bilal, let me take you now to the core of our discussion on the interview, the Islamic Online University. How did it came about?
Well, in 2007, actually, a number of people were writing me on the internet, emailing me and asking me about some different websites which they wanted to go and study at. So when I looked at the websites, they asked my opinion. I went and looked at the websites. I found that they were deviant.
There's one I always go to, islamiccity.com, islamiccity.com.
That's a general website. That's okay. That's not really, a study website per se, meaning that it's a college of some sort online. But there are some already up there, and people had gone, and there were, one called Sunni Path and a few others like this, which were in fact really, they had deviant ideas with them. So I felt that there needed to be an alternative for people. So that was like around 2007. I decided to go ahead and start a university course, really a diploma, which was to be offered freely, in order to compete with these others who had already been functioning for 2, 3, 4 years ahead of me. In order to draw and attract people, I offered it, and of course, in case I wanted it to be accessible to everybody, I offered it freely. And people responded in droves. They started coming, signing up. Within the first year we had some 2,000 plus students. Second year, 4,000 plus. Third year, we're going to 8,000. Now there are over 100,000 students studying the diploma course across the world. From every single country on the face of the earth, we now have students.
How does this online university work?
Well, the diploma course, and we started, I should mention,